Hello, Brigitte.
Hello, good evening, Emilia.
Very nice to see you, and thank you for joining me from Strasbourg in this
Thank you
conversation.
for inviting me.
I wanted to ask you about the situation in France since the outbreak of the coronavirus. France was quite badly affected, like many other countries in Europe. And I wanted to actually to ask you about how, first of all, how did the French government respond to the outbreak, and about the psychological help in France? Was it available quickly enough when the outbreak actually took hold in France?
Okay, well, actually, it's interesting because this is the last day of the 8 weeks quarantine. Tomorrow, the quarantine is progressively lifted as of tomorrow. It started in Germany I think about 10 days ago, and now we will experience that. Now in France, it's very different according to the regions. There are regions who have hardly been affected by the virus, while others were extremely affected. Particularly where I live. I live in the epicenter of the epidemics
Mm-hmm.
in Alsace, right on the border of Germany. In January, there was a big meeting, evangelical meeting, with over 3,000 or 4,000 people who met, and it set the virus bomb. And it's only a month and a half later that the lockdown was decreed in France.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, in my region, a lot of people got the virus before the lockdown.
Mm-hmm. 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 How are people responding to the lockdown in France?
Globally, uh, not well, at least not well at the beginning. The government started to say, okay, stay home, be distant. But in the first days, no one obeyed, especially in big cities. So the government started to have different ways of approaching it. In particular, we had to sign a form before going out. We were only limited to go out to go shopping once a day, or to go jogging for an hour and no more than in a perimeter of a kilometer. So, and we had to sign that paper in a sense, to sign it to ourselves. So a lot of people felt very infantilized by the system.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see my patients, I mean, some of them accepted the lockdown rather well, while others were extremely anxious and angry at the privation of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's interesting because in French, the term which was used was confinement, um, from the Latin con, with, and fin, the border. That term in English can be translated either by confinement
Mm-hmm.
or by containment.
Mm-hmm.
And one has a rather negative connotation. Confinement is no freedom, no liberty, while containment is really protection, means protection.
Yes, in the UK, the term that was used by the government and it's used popularly is self-isolation. So we are all self-isolating. Whereas in the States, I heard from an American colleague, they call it a shelter. So they're living in shelter in America, and we are living in isolation, in self-isolation in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if as Jungians, maybe we can think about the different responses in terms of typology, that introverts are finding it more bearable or even enjoying it, while the extroverts feel confined.
Yes, yes, certainly. And also, I'm not sure it is just a matter of typology, or not just a matter of typology.
Mhm,
It, I believe it's really how you um, how you deal with yourself, how you deal with your inner self, what sense of inner self you have developed, which will help you to feel okay during that time, or in the contrary, which will make you feel anxious and terribly angry.
mhm, mhm,
Um, if I think if we have the capacity of relating to our inner life or to an inner life, if we have the capacity for reverie, for um, imaginal, to, if we find if we find it pleasant to be with ourselves,
mhm.
I think then uh, this confinement can be really containment. Um,
Yes, it depends. I think if I'm following rightly what you're saying is that it depends on the relationship between ego and self and on how ego relates to the internal life.
yes, for me, the self is not so much a concept. It's a reality. It's an experience,
Mhm,
and not having to go to work every day at rush at 7 o'clock and
mhm,
have to do all the usual things we have to do. Um, gave us the opportunity to experience the self
mhm.
in a closer way, I believe, but only for those who have that capacity.
Yes, yes.
And and that's, I think, our role as analysts, to help our patients to relate to that inner self, to
Mhm.
make their life, to have this feeling that life is thicker, deeper, thicker.
Would you say that in France, the psychological help for the people affected by the virus has been made available quickly enough and to the extent that's needed by the people in France?
Yes. Okay. In general, uh, French people are less likely to seek psychological help than in Germany, for instance, because it's not covered by the health insurance.
Mhm,
But with the sanitary crisis, great numbers of psychologists have offered their help in hospitals, uh, in, um, in hospices, in nursing homes, with children, with people who needed help. The French Jungian Society, SFPA, has started a hotline for hospital workers, doctors, nurses, workers, for whom it had, for whom it was very, very difficult in certain regions, at least.
mhm.
Um, and it was a very, it still is. It was still continuing the hotline. It's very interesting,
Mhm.
very important.
Yes. And from,
Trivial.
from the working in analysis point of view, now that we all have to work online,
Yes.
Many analysts actually have now had to put the whole clinical work online, some partly. How do you find it?
Ah, interesting. Um, in general, French analysts have a difficult time with telework, with Zoom or Skype or telework. They're not used to it. Actually, we had a big debate last fall within SFPA of whether we could allow some of the trainees to have some numbers of hours on Skype.
Mm-hmm.
Number of my colleagues consider that work on Skype is not psychoanalysis, that it's at best psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
I do not so much agree with that. I've worked with Skype since it exists with patients and supervisors from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in my private practice here in Strasbourg, it's interesting because I have half of my practice with, I would say, traditional French people who are seeking psychoanalysis, often Jungian psychoanalysis after they have had Lacanian analysis.
Uh-huh.
And I'm also working with English-speaking patients who live and work in Strasbourg. It's quite an international city.
Mm-hmm.
And all my English-speaking patients had no problem switching to Skype or Zoom or WebEx or whatever. I mean, I was open to what they wanted. But the reaction of my French patient was, "Oh, no, 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 we'll wait until the end of the confinement."
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll, okay, perhaps by phone, but certainly not by Skype.
That is
And
very.
after a few weeks, a few people called me and tried.
Uh-huh.
Also, and I think it's also interesting, some people told me that they are doing Skype for their work as telework
Mm-hmm.
all day long, and they don't want to do their therapy on Skype, as you know, as if it were the same as work.
Yes, yes, yes.
And also, some people live in a rather small apartment, small flat, and they didn't feel it was discreet enough with the kids or the husband
Mm-hmm.
in the next, in the next room, and they didn't feel comfortable and private enough to do analysis on Skype.
Yes. It does require a major adjustment, both from analysts and from the clients.
Yes, yes, I hope that within the French society we will have a big discussion with our various experience, and I hope that we will move the lines.
We will all have to rethink actually both our work and our trainings and supervisions,
Yes,
because it's unknown how long the lockdowns are going to continue in different countries. And
yes,
also when they are finally removed or opened, again, it will be a question of the degree and the question of, excuse me, personal decisions that people will be making as to
yes.
how far they want to go back to what used to be called as normality. So we are in for, I think we're in for a major change in the way we work, in the way we think, in the way we live.
Yeah. It's also a way to bring analysis to more people.
Yes.
Like in France, it's a very centralized country. All is around, Paris, and around Paris, I think, represents almost half of the population.
Mm-hmm.
And most of our analysts live there. So if there is an analysant from another area in France, sometimes it can be as far as 800 kilometers or more from Paris,
Mhm.
it will be very difficult. It's very difficult for people to have to take the train to go to Paris. So being able to do telework will make things more easy.
And for some people, as you say, is the only way to have analysis, even though it can be called psychotherapy by some colleagues who are very strict about the terms we use for our work, and also the only way for some people to train or to have supervision.
Yes, of course, there are limitations, and if we can see each other face to face or on the couch, it's probably better in many ways. Uh, Although I think that on Skype, we also learn new things. We
Yes,
see our patients and they see us in another light.
yes,
It
yes,
is like sometimes, I live in a rather small town. I mean, and sometimes I can see a patient at the terrace of a cafe, and I will see that that person is quite different from the patient who is in my office.
yes.
In the same way, we can also rediscover our patients differently when on Skype.
Yes, it's a new experience, both for us and for our clients. We've come to the end already of our conversation. It went really quickly, and we just started to talk about something that actually I think will remain an important topic, particularly where we are now in our conversation that we are ending,
Yeah,
unfortunately, how to work with online, how to work online, and the different effects that it will continue to have both on us, on our profession, and on our clients and trainees.
yeah.
Is there something you would like to say before we end?
I think I want to thank IAP for all the wonderful work which is being done, especially with the routers, with the new societies, with expanding the work in all the different areas in the world.
Mhm.
I think in this way, we're really contributing um, to an improvement of the world.
Thank you very much, Brigitte. It was wonderful to see you and to have this conversation. And I hope we'll be in touch soon again.
Thank you. Thank
And
you. Yeah,
meanwhile, keep well.
you too. And
Bye
we'll
for now.
see you sometimes.
Yes, bye for now.